Hi, this is Nicholas Alexiou from the Hellenic American Projects at Queen's College Department and the Department of Sociology in the series of oral history interviews, which is at the core of HAP's mission, is today the interview with a very well-known and very beloved poet and member of the Greek American community, Ms. Penelope Karageorge. Penelope, thank you very much for accepting HAP's invitation to participate into today's interview. We're looking forward to talk with you. And let's start with the first level of the first set of questions, which is about the family background, who came first in the States, where you were born and where you grew up.
Well, thank you for the lovely introduction, Nico. I was born in Newburgh, New York. My mother and father were both from the island of Lemnos. They did not meet there, they met here. And my mother's father actually was from Chalandriza, which is outside of Patras. So my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side, they also met in the United States. And my mother grew up, actually, until she was 11, they went back to Greece. My grandfather was a restless man, very handsome man. I have his picture, I should show it to you, in his wonderful cavalryman's uniform. And he kept thinking the streets were paved with gold. It never quite worked out. He'd go back to Greece, come back here. And my dad left Lemnos when he was 15. His mother was afraid he was going to be taken into the army. And he went to Alexandria, where his brother was. Then he came to the United States and worked in, various like odd jobs in restaurants. A friend of his had moved to Newburgh. My dad went up there to visit him, and he said, well, that's where he wanted to live. It reminded him of Greece with the, there was no sea, but there was the river, the Hudson River, and the wonderful mountains, and he did love Newburgh. And he was a terrific person. He was, of course, 15 years older than my mother. That was the style. I guess the style then, they're introduced by cousins at some picnic or other. And they were, I think, unusual in many ways as far as our education. They sent my sister and me to a private school, which was actually, it was a boarding school, Mount St. Mary's Academy. It's now a college. And this was Dominican nuns who taught. It was very lovely, trees and grass and occasionally they could be angry, but they were great teachers. And wonderfully about, particularly in English, they really wanted to know the English language. They, in early, like the first grade, they were giving us poetry, poems to read. So that was lovely. And also my mother and father gave my sister Helen and me a set of books for, I guess I was about 6 and Helen was 8. And among the books was a child's odyssey. So we were early tuned into the Greek history and background. And mother and father had no, education per se. My dad was a reader, so was my mother. But, it was her hope, she said, to bring me up differently than she'd been brought up. She was very bright. When she was a kid, she won some writing contests. But her mother, my beloved Yaya, ripped up her library card. You know, like my little grandmother could not read or write, Sevasti, and she, you know, was like difficult for her. My mother was sticking her head in the book, and my grandmother thought she'd do some more embroidery. Well, they wouldn't let her go to high school. She had to learn sewing. And my uncle, he always said, Melpany, was my mother's name, Melp. You're the smart one, but he went to Stuyvesant High School. And anyway, my mother, she loved New York City.
So the parents came more or less a little bit after the Second War. They came
before the Second World War.
Before the Second War,
yes,
right?
Yes,
so and usually while you growing up in the house, you heard the language, the food was Greek, so you had an environment that was pretty much Greek, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But this was it. When my grandmother, she lived with us, she returned to Greece. Greek was my first language. She left and we stopped speaking Greek at home. So I forgot the language. And I've tried repeatedly to learn it, but it's never worked.
And also at the school you went, the boarding school, which is one of the most, well-known exceptional schools, as you said, over the years, with the nuns and this, they knew that you were Greek, and that played a role. So you're allowed to speak the ethnic language. Were other children, other students there from different ethnic backgrounds, or it was a more homogeneous Anglo-Saxonic, school?
No, it was Newburgh, by the way. I mean, I left that school after the 8th grade and I went to the public high school, but Newburgh was like a little melting pot. Everybody had some ethnic. You were Italian or Greek or Jewish. So there was nothing like odd or, although at the Mount, among the nuns, there were 2 little Jewish girls in the class. So actually it was very nice. We could sit on the side when they were learning catechism, but it was not, like looked down upon or discriminated upon. I think Greece always wins respect, for its history and no, I mean no, it was a very Greek environment, Nico, very Greek. It wasn't just the food. There was like a whole community of Greeks. And what I loved about it, relatives, extended family. And the great thing about the Greeks, they were very visible. Nobody worked in an office. There was a guy who, cleaned hats and you saw him. There was a peanut vendor, but there were like confectionaries, like running. You could go from the top of the hill in Newburgh to the bottom, and these wonderful places, the Streifus Candy Kitchen, and then the Fondus, and all the way. So it was great. It was very the thing is that of course the church was a big deal, and all the holidays, Greek Independence Day, the kids always participated in a special program, and we were treated like jewels because, my sister would play the piano, and I was.
It is still a Greek community there.
This is very interesting because my cousin, who is actually like half Greek and was raised as a Catholic, And she has come over to the Greek world. And, you know, like later on, she belongs to the Greek church now. She's very involved. Yeah, it's a very active group still, you know. And I try and, you know, whenever they have a dance or a party, I try and go. And I love them. I mean, it's a wonderful, very interesting community. Very, I mean, all the families there were very interested in educating their kids. So you have Harvard Law School graduates, et cetera.
As a child with a parent, you had a chance, opportunity to visit Greece and the island?
No, this is no. This is it, no. You know, one thing is, you know, after World War II, and, you know, even, you know, I mean, I had a very happy childhood, but I was always aware of this other dark side of the Greek tragedy. I know my grandmother went back to Greece. She was cooked for the Nazis in her house. They had, you know, taken over, and very difficult. My mother and father used to write letters. I mean, this fine paper, you know, writing in Greek to my dad. This is interesting. He left home when he was 15, but he never stopped writing to his family. He was the youngest of 10 kids. So mother and father would pack these huge boxes with clothes and everything to send to Greece. And once I put a doll in. And years later, when I did go to Greece, and, you know, I was living in my grandmother's house. My grandmother, of course, was not there anymore. She had died many years before that, but heard this knocking on the door. It was
Think about that, your first time visiting Greece. How you felt? If you have some images, some stories around that. This is very interesting.
That was amazing. The first time I went, I didn't go to Limnos. I went because my grandmother had died, but my grandfather was still alive, and he was living in Hallandrica near Patras. And I stayed with him for a week. It's still very vivid to me, those memories of him. He was this tall, distinguished looking man, but at that time he was older. He was still wearing like a pinstripe suit. That was in my honor, you know, and was very moving, his memories. We would talk, and at night, I could hear there were, I think, sheep outside the window, bells. I had like a gas lamp, you know, so I could read. And he was a very, very, very articulate man, wonderful English. He was the postmaster there in the town. And when he walked me, that was Hallandrica, he took me to the ferry when I was leaving in Patras. And it was quite heartbreaking. He had lost a son. His son died when he was 5 years old in New York. And my grandfather was talking about it, and he said that he died, he had a ruptured appendix. And finally, my grandfather picked him up and he was taking him to the hospital. And the little kid hadn't been out in a couple of weeks, I guess. And he said, "Oh, Daddy," he said, "listen to the music." That was the street sounds and everything. And the two of us were just weeping. This had happened how many years ago? He was 82. And, you know, that is part of Greek emotion. I think you never forget. The feeling can be invoked, you know.
And of course, you're received with a lot of love, but family members or neighbors, they saw you more as an American or also as a Greek. You received also.
And with my grandfather, I don't know what they made of me, but they were wonderful to me because I didn't speak Greek, but somehow we were communicating. But they made such a fuss over me. I stayed with the cousins, and they would like just have a special dinner for me and the man of the house, like I was a privileged guest. And you know, they treated me so. Their hospitality was amazing. And I remember there was a very elderly lady who came. She was, you know, like close to the family. She saw that I was there, and she brought, because they didn't have a lot of, I don't know, eggs or something. Or she brought a rabbit to be cooked for me, and the rabbit, and then they made like a ton of eggs and heavy Greek oil, of course. So, I mean, it was, you know, but they really wanted to show me the best. And I had a good time. They were showing movies in the schoolhouse at night, and they would have like a tray of beer. You know, everyone in the village would go to the schoolhouse, see the movie, and drink beer. It was quite wonderful. But my mother and father never went back. Never.
Any reason why not? Can
They had
you?
no desire to return. I mean, they were writing but then when I went to, so later, I went to Limnos. I went,
And an easy trip because Greece, at least before hosting the Olympics in 2004, most of the transportation was more difficult. The new roads or the direct flights from city to city, they were established after after 2004 in the Olympic Games. So it wasn't easy to travel, right?
No, you're right. You're right. I'd forgotten that. It's true, though. I mean, that was its charm, though. I loved it. It was so primitive. Like when I stayed with my grandfather, there were a couple of young people, you know, like my age, but of course, they were great too. And they said, come on, they wanted to see a movie. And you had to get on the bus to go into Patras, I guess. But there were all like this stuff on the roof and chickens, you know what I mean? And the bus was bouncing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was the style then. There was not, I like that. I like that primitive feeling, which was when when I finally did go to Limnos, I went in the middle of the winter. I mean, like no one goes to my godmother lived in Athens. And I said, well, why don't you come with me? I want to go to Limnos. And she said, no one goes to a Greek island in the middle of the winter. But I didn't. It's true that, I mean, the planes, like now you get on the plane, it's so crowded. I got a plane and it was one other person on the plane because it was like a rare flight, I guess. But this was very interesting, though, because
which year was that? Around about?
I don't remember because it was not of recent vintage, but was it the 60s, the 70s?
And for how long you stayed there in Limnos?
Well, when I went there the first time in the middle of the winter, I didn't stay long, just for like, how long? Maybe 4 or 5 days. But that was really awesome to see it. It was so beautiful, I thought. I was a little anxious about arriving, not speaking Greek, And I said, well, to my mother, I said, you know, what do I do? I get there and I don't think they knew I was coming. She said, don't worry about it. Like, just go. You will find. Anyway, I went to first to Lichna, and it was so beautiful because my cousin had a herd of sheep, and it was so lovely. It was a stark winter and these beautiful sheep. And they were very gracious to me, very gracious. They had a daughter, my cousin George, and his wife. But they were in the, Lichna, but my dad's family was in Cospega, which is a very lovely, like old stone houses overlooking the water, completely across the island. And, it was early on, Nico, because they had electricity in Lichna. They did not have electricity in Cospega. So anyway, I took a taxi with my cousin to Cospega, and my dad, who had been writing to them from the time he was 15 years old, well, he was the youngest of 10 children. And his oldest sister was still alive. And she was so amazing because she was so wonderful, straight posture, like a million wrinkles on her face, but she was beautiful. And they were so thrilled to see me. They kept patting me. They couldn't believe I was real. Like my dad, who had left so long ago. And they were so lovely. They were just beautiful. And they gave me a big sack, probably this hand-woven material of raisins and nuts for my dad to bring back for him. And that was great. I was being fancy, Nico, staying in the Hilton, so this big sack perfumed my room. And that was the first time and then I went back, of course, later when my mom gave me my grandmother's house. My grandmother left it to her and she gave it to me. And that they were also very welcoming, I must say. When I went there, I had papers, as they say, but my cousin George, he had a friend who had come from the United States, spoke English, very helpful. And they were so gracious to me. I mean, they could have said, what are you doing? You're coming here. Why didn't you come here when your grandmother was alive? That hurts me, Nick, that I didn't. But what did I know? I mean, I didn't go to Greece until after, I had worked, I'd saved some money and I went. But as I said, my mother and father never.
So tell us, when you left the northern parts of New York and you came to Manhattan, because for all the years I know you live in Manhattan, you love Manhattan, you
Yes.
wrote and you keep writing about Manhattan.
Right.
Tell
So,
us, yes, tell us, like Whitman, who loved Manhattan. So tell us about your move to Manhattan.
Manhattan, yes, I came here. I had lived in San Francisco for a year after I graduated from college, Simmons College in Boston. And there was a lot of Greek involvement there too. But I worked for the newspaper in Newburgh. And then I came to New York, lived in the Village for a while, and then to my various addresses in New York. But anyway, I worked for Newsweek. I decided I wanted to be fancy. It wasn't a writing job, but it was a job as a researcher reporter. And one of the people I started out with was Nora Ephron, who later, of course, became very famous. But I worked for the newsmakers department. So you're a researcher, you do all the reporting, and then the writer writes, he would write, short pieces. It's called newsmakers. And so I interviewed these fabulous people. I interviewed Betty Davis at length. I met Frank Sinatra, believe it or not. I shook old Blue Eye's hands. and
who was very fond of Greece, because I remember during the war, he played a role to a concert to collect money. But this is 60s and 70s, right? And a lot of things are happening. The movement, the social movements, the political movements give us a sense of the environment also, and also of these big personalities.
Yes. Well, that was the, as I said, I was working for Newsweek, personalities, and my Greek involvement then was probably less, I mean, I was still very close to all the Greeks of Newburgh, but no, I can't say that because I had a Greek roommate. I had Greek friends whom I still remain friends with. And, it was an interesting time, a lot of kind of social life.
And also Manhattan had a lot of Greek, places, right? The cafes, the restaurants, the music scene, right?
How could I forget that? What am I talking about? Because we used to go to all these wonderful places on the West Side, and they had the bouzouki bands, and that was huge, and that was great. That was a shame. They all sort of drifted away. And there were restaurants like Molfetta's and, a lot of smaller places.
And also, it wasn't only ethnic, it was a mix of various people with different backgrounds, right? People also non-Greeks used to go and
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And then there were some fancy Greek restaurants. I remember one where they handed out roses. It was very fashionable. There was a very period there with, I think, Melina Mercury, and it was suddenly chic to be Greek, and
and the Iliad Darling, they play at Broadway, right? When
yes,
and
yes, absolutely. That was.
Then all of a sudden, in Greece, we have the military junta, and a lot of the organization to oppose the junta also moved here in the States. It was an anti-junta movement.
Yes.
You have some stories, since you also were a reporter at the same time.
No, I remember. Well, I mean, I was very much against the colonels. I never wrote anything about that. I had moved from newsmakers. I went up to the religion department, and I met Archbishop Iakovos. I was invited up there, and that was, very wonderful. I became quite friendly with Nikki Stephanopoulos, who was and her wonderful husband, Father Robert Stephanopoulos, at the cathedral, and Hellenic University Club had some wonderful events, the Greek parade, all these were very important. Unfortunately, I didn't get involved with the, writing about the colonels or fighting them, let's say, no.
But you were aware of all of those things, right?
I was very much opposed to the colonels. I mean, that was a horrible thing, really, that they should be there. But yes, the Greek involvement really was an ongoing theme in my life. It was never absent, you know, from school, from Simmons College, where the Orthodox Club, I was president one year, my friend Electra would be the next year. We never lost touch. And then there was the city, from all the different colleges. There was like a gathering.
Again, the 60s and the 70s is the beginning of the new mass wave of immigration from Greece to the States. So you saw many newcomers and new
Yes.
people. How you saw the new Greeks, since you had an image of the old communities before the war and all that? How you saw any similarities and differences?
That's interesting because I had forgotten that there were like the new Greeks and the old Greeks. But what I remember was the infusion of new Greeks. There seemed to be a lot of like intellectuals in the crowd, you know, interesting people. And through the Hellenic University Club, they were having, different gatherings. But I do think there was a certain snobbish attitude, like we are the old Greeks, and here are the new Greeks storming the palace, so to speak. That didn't last very long, though.
Is the language a point of conflict, or as you said, a different approach? Is speaking Greek or not very well Greek an issue?
Definitely. It is a real issue, and it's been troubling to me. And believe it or not, I've studied Greek, Nika, but it never caught on. And it's always an issue. Whenever I meet Greek people, it's always, why don't you speak Greek? And, I really don't know why my mother and father didn't continue speaking Greek at home. I mean, they would speak Greek to each other, but not to us.
So, but how you identify yourself, though, your ethnic identity? If
as a Greek American,
a very elusive issue, of course, but just for the sake of the conversation, yeah.
I know what you're saying, but see, that's always that barrier too. I mean, I'm a Greek American, definitely Greek.
Yeah.
I mean, so Greek, going to Greece so often. And, like almost every summer going to Limnos, going to the house. And here's an interesting thing. In Limnos, one of the very first people to befriend me was Stella. She was married to my cousin, and Stella and I became the most wonderful friends. And I still don't know how we communicated. She didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Greek, but we were very close. Very close. We would have conversations. And she would invite me over to lunch, and I would invite her over to my house. She would say, Penelope, ochi tea, cafe, get that tea stuff. And she was a darling. I love her. And I'm now very close to her son and her granddaughter, who speaks perfect English, goes to the university and so on.
So do you think that language, it is equivalent to ethnic identity, or it's not necessarily, as long as people know about Greece, understand what is the culture about, because it's still that debate, right?
Well, the thing is, I feel that since I'm a great lover of everything Greek and philosophy and poetry, and you know, I feel that my soul is Greek. Absolutely. I mean, I have many Greek friends. And here in New York, good heavens, like the, you know, being Greek American, like the Cornelia Street Cafe, John Callis, and, you know, Dean, and like a whole community of writers, and you, and, you know, it's been, so it is terrible. I mean, but I finally said, well, I can't keep. I mean, just 2 years ago, I took more Greek lessons, but they didn't really take, you know. So.
And then at some point, you became an educator. You taught at City University of New York, right? At City College.
Yes.
Tell us about your experience with CUNY, since Queen's College is also another college of CUNY, and also with a very multicultural environment there, City College, right? Huge reputation, and also a Greek community. Tell us about your experience with CUNY.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite interesting because that was like an abrupt cutoff in my life. I had worked for People magazine for 7 years, and they had like a purge. They, you know, eliminated half the staff, including my boss. So they gave us offices to get new jobs. But I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I wrote that novel, this one. And then I went to City College, CUNY, for a master's degree. And that's when I really started writing more poetry, because that's all I did was write poetry for that master's degree, working with William Matthews.
And here, please allow me to make a note to our audience that we'll talk specifically about your poetry and your novels on the second part of our discussion.
Yes.
And it will be in that thing. So I'm looking forward also to that part, so people can find the second interview and understand what you're doing more. But I would like to know more about teaching at CUNY, and also your journalistic job. Let's talk about the environment and how journalism in New York or in America has changed over the years, because this is a very interesting part of your life too.
Right. Well, as far as, you know, I love journalism. I'm still writing I contribute some articles to the National Herald, but I wrote for many years for, well, not that many, as long as it lasted, for Odyssey magazine. Do you remember Odyssey?
Yeah, one of the most important magazine for Greeks abroad. Yeah, of course.
A lot of cover stories for them. Interviewed Olympia Dukakis. I wrote all sorts of pieces. Big story on the Greeks of New York, and you know, various other publications, Greek publications that really aren't in business now. But at City College, when I got the master's, the head of the English department, I had one more course left, so to get the master's, and I went up there, and he said to me, "You want to teach, don't you?" And I said, "Well, yes." You know, I was like changing my life. No more corporation, no more, the end of that. So he said, okay. He said, the professor who was going to be teaching this class just called me. He's in Europe. He's not coming back. And how would you like to, you know, take it over? So I didn't know what it was going to be, but I said, sure, of course. So this was, I said, well, when do I start? He said, tomorrow. Ah, well, I had not really taught before per se, except in college. I had a group of children in drama, a little drama group. But so they gave me curriculum, what I would be teaching, which is quite awesome. Candide, the Odyssey, the Bible, Dante's Inferno. What else?
All material that you are very familiar with already, of course.
Oh, I mean, like, you know, suddenly a refresher course. You know, I started, you know, I had not taught, as I said. Anyway, this was interesting. My class was, I taught at night. So it was a very mixed bag, very mixed. You know, I don't know, but 137th Street, this was a 4-year college. Some friends of mine were teaching like more like in the junior college level. And, you know, anyway, the, I think this was open enrollment. And not, I mean, it was so uneven. Some of these students were really struggling with English. So if you're struggling with English and you are expected to read the Odyssey or Dante's Inferno, oh, Macbeth. Yes. And I really loved doing it, but it wasn't it was a very hard job, I thought. I spent hours and hours of preparation. And, you know, I mean, some of these kids were wonderful. They weren't all kids, they were older people's night class. You know, I was very touched because they were trying, and they had some very interesting questions too. But then when it came to assigning papers, that was difficult because, you know, often they would not turn them in. And it was things like, well, I just couldn't get it done because I had an uncle who was getting out of jail in North Carolina, and I had to go down. I mean, it was crazy. And then they were also, and this was, I kept saying, please do not do it, but there was a temptation to, you know, what do you call it, plagiarize Cliff Notes. And, you know, it was so obvious. But I had a couple of brilliant people too. But I would say over and over again, please, your ideas are important. Your ideas. I mean, don't worry about it, just present them, even if they're not perfect. It's what you're thinking. And that's what, you know, we're trying to stimulate here. We're trying to, you know, learn and probe and have some originality.
Over the past 2 years, a lot of courses in CUNY and other schools were conducted remotely. How do you see that, to be a teacher from long distance, a virtual teacher, than having this direct, you know,
remote teaching
thing with students? As an educator, how you feel that, the direct impact and approach to remote learning?
I suppose it would make everything easier in a way. I mean, you wouldn't be dealing with a disruptive classroom on occasion. You, I think you should be much better is there in person. Actually, I do. I think remote could work, but I think you would have less people contributing. And that's half of it. It's for people to discuss and talk and, you know, even if it's a struggle. Oh, yes, I remember it was very interesting to me that like these kids liked, they liked Jane Austen. I don't know why that's coming all back to me. And I said, why do they like Jane Austen? And came to me, it said, of course, because it's talking about a family and, you know, they could relate to that. And whenever I could, I would show a movie, and that helped. Like Pride. I like teaching, Nico. I don't know if I mean, one woman I remember told me, she said to me, oh, you were a wonderful teacher. Aren't you teaching anymore? No. But I think I would like maybe to teach, you know, maybe poetry writing, or I think I would enjoy that.
Since we mentioned the pandemic and the lockdowns that come back into our mind, how you experience the pandemic that influence your writing, your contact with people, your emotions? Tell us about the pandemic a little bit.
About which?
About the pandemic and the lockdown we had, how that affected you.
Pandemic. Oh my gosh, that was interesting. The pandemic. You know, being a writer, I don't think it really affected me in such a horrible way because I was inured to being away from the crowd. I mean, I'm a very social person, but only part of the time. So I was here, I was writing. I was writing, yes, during it. And yeah, I mean, that it was a very sad time, I would say, very sad, scary. And I mean, the city was so weird.
Yeah, also because you live in Manhattan and you have a first-hand experience. There was a lot of trouble sometimes, some areas of Manhattan, right? With also the tension among various groups, Black Lives Matter and things with the authorities and other white groups. So how you experience the racial tensions and conflicts in this?
Racial tensions. I felt the racial tensions when I taught it at CUNY. You know, that was when I experienced them. Like one gal, this very attractive Black gal, and she was transferring to Howard. But she, one day I don't know, in some literary reference, she talked about her white boyfriend, and I think that offended the people around her. I mean, was you getting to see the nuances in this, and the difficulties. I mean, I really am thankful for, like Black is beautiful or whatever. I mean, bringing and Black people out, because a lot of them, like when I was teaching at CUNY, even didn't have, the opportunity to learn as well as their fellow white students. And I think this is much better now. I mean, do you find that at all?
Yes, of course. And also, you as a female academic, as a female journalist working in the corporate world, a female writer. Can you tell us some of the challenges, what is to be a woman and also being in those different environments that more or less are male environments?
Well, I have a poem about one, but no, I mean, it was hard for a woman. Like for the newspaper in Newburgh, that was great. I was their like women's editor. I, free carte blanche. But at Newsweek, as I told you, Nora Ephron was there. They're very hard for a woman to be a writer at Newsweek, extremely difficult. And so when I left Newsweek, I did book publicity. That was interesting. I did publicity for the Free Press of Macmillan. And this was like the intellectual arm of Macmillan, a lot of scholarly books. And yeah, I mean, public relations, you were more acceptable. Then when I decided I didn't want to do PR anymore. At the time I was married, I was on my way to get a divorce, and I started sending out letters of application. So I wrote one to People magazine, applying for a job as a writer. And my then husband said, "Oh, why don't you apply for a job as an astronaut while you're at it?" Quite cruel, but male chauvinist. Anyway, I sent it off to the editor, and I got a phone call from the public relations director of Time Inc. saying, "Your letter was given to me by the editor of People magazine, and there is no job for a writer, but we're looking for a publicity manager for People. And would you be interested in that job?" So I said, okay. I mean, I thought, wow, why not? So that's what I did. But yeah, I mean, then I went back to like freelance writing. No, it was not easy to be a woman writer on the staff of a magazine. People had some women writers, but it was mostly men. And Newsweek had, at that time, sure it's more, but they had like one woman writer. All the rest were reporters. Like you'd get the story and then the writer would write it. That was the system. So no, it was not. It was not. I mean, if I had gone to a different angle, like fashion, there were more openings. And I took the hard way, I think, Nico. I think that I was like very ridiculous when I look back on it, because the best things I enjoyed were like writing for Odyssey, different things like great. And I think I was dazzled by the idea of working for Newsweek instead of like a trade magazine where, there you could be a writer. I worked for a while for, what was it called? Monthly Lingerie or something. I don't remember. But no, I mean, I think that women do not have an easy time of it. No, they don't.
Since you mentioned Odyssey and other magazines, according to your sense, do you think that Greek American publications, magazine, journals have diminished over the years? And if so, why you think so that happened?
Why they disappeared, a lot of them?
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's interesting. Like I don't know why Odyssey was closed down. I mean, that was a great magazine. And they couldn't, maybe a lot of these outfits haven't been as, like, have a plan. have a plan for like advertising. You know what I mean? You know, which you need to support the publication. And I think that's part of it. You know, they're idealistic, they start out, they're small operations, and their backers can't support them endlessly, and they disappear. So I think it's wonderful that the National Herald, I think, has, you know, keeps getting better. And then there's a lovely paper in Philadelphia, Hellenic News. But I also think, I don't know if Greek readers support these publications. You know, I've subscribed for years to the National Herald.
Another issue within the Greek American community the recent 2-3 years is the concept or the question of voting, if Greek Americans should participate in Greek elections from the area where they live. Do you think that the vote is something that will connect the Greeks in the States, or somehow create a new division?
Actually, I think it would create more of a division. I do. I think that to be a voter, a really responsible voter, you have to be there. You have to be involved. And I think, you know, a lot of people just say, they don't even think about it, they just walk into the voting booth. And I don't think they would act any differently with Greek elections. I mean, so what good is it? You know? I mean, it's a lovely idealistic idea. I don't know if they're still doing it in Greece, but I was so amazed. One summer, all these people arrived. Greece paid to bring people from far-flung places to vote. So all these people had trips, they were in the village, they were voting. I found that so fascinating. I like that. I mean, but they were real Greek citizens.
Yeah. Also, in concluding our this first part of our nice conversation of the oral history, what is your vision about the continuity of Hellenism in New York and in the States in general? You think that will continue to understand ourselves as a community, or will be totally assimilated as happened with other groups? And also, as a woman that, you know, work in the corporate world in journalism and education, an advice that you like to give to a young Greek American or otherwise female that starts now? Some of your thoughts and experiences on that.
Yeah, well, my advice to a young person would be to not compromise yourself. Like if you want to be a writer on a newspaper or a magazine or a television writer, whatever, I mean, get a job where you can work your way towards that. I mean, don't suddenly accept and say like, okay, I'll just do advertising copy. You know, if you're a journalist, I mean, stick to it. You know, do not be dissuaded by, you know, that's going to give you more money or this or that. And to, you know, to take a job that, if it's the beginning of what you want, definitely, but don't get like pushed aside. You know, I think you got to fight for it. I do. I think I would advise to be more aggressive. You know, to say, well, why can't I have that assignment? Or, you know, I mean, try maybe an imaginative approach. You know, if you write something, you know, get it in the hands of the right person. And yeah.
What about the future of Hellenism in America? You think will...
That troubles me, Nico. Like, to me, it's very important. And of course, the church has always played a big place, I think, in preserving, you know, Greek life and, you know, still going strong in Newburgh. It's also, the thing is, it's like intermarriage, of course, that's the oldie. But I know the churches seem to do a lot, like the cathedral, they give Greek lessons and they have a school. So, you know, hopefully that makes an impression too. You know, I really don't know, because like, I know, like, I have so many Greek friends and I'm so involved, but like, I have cousins who, you know, did not, well, I told you my Greek cousin returned to the fold, but like a couple of other cousins who are half Greek and that really have no connection with Greece. And I have one cousin, and she's just a wonderful person. And every year I say to her, Nancy, you know, would you like to come to Lemnos? She has never come. She went on a tour of the Greek islands. You know what I mean? It's like a superficial thing, but you gotta like dig in. You can't just. And that worries me, even in Greece, Nico, even in Lemnos, it's gotten more, there's no longer a campanile. The one grocery store in the village is gone. There's a lovely restaurant, the best one on the island, but like the old fashioned stuff isn't there so much, you know, which I miss. So.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate our discussion with Penelope Karageorge, and pretty soon we will have this second interview about your art, about poetry and the literary world. Again, the Hellenic American Project and myself personal, thank you very much for being here with us today. Thank you, Penelope.
Thank you, Nico, for listening to my rattling on. I appreciate your interest and gracious questions. Thank you.